Die Beiträge der nächsten 90 Minuten werden zum einen thematisieren, wie eine Automatisierung von solchen Prozessen und Entscheidungen, die großteils bislang noch menschlichem Ermessen unterliegen, unsere Kultur und Lebenswelt verändert. Und zum anderen aber auch, welchen Einfluss Kultur und Gesellschaft auf die konkrete Ausgestaltung künstlicher Intelligenz haben. Auch hier zunächst wieder ein paar Zahlen aus unserer aktuellen ÖFIT-Umfrage. Wir haben unter anderem die Frage gestellt, in welchen Bereichen künstliche Intelligenz wie eingesetzt werden sollte. Hier die Ergebnisse zum Einsatz in der öffentlichen Verwaltung. Wie Sie sehen, deuten die Ergebnisse darauf hin, dass eine Mehrheit der Befragten sich für den unterstützenden Einsatz von KI für die Aufgaben der öffentlichen Verwaltung ausspricht. Immerhin aber 19% generell gegen den Einsatz von KI und lediglich 10% für eine Automatisierung von Entscheidungen in der öffentlichen Verwaltung. Zu diesen Ergebnissen passen auch die Beobachtungen, dass KI-Systeme einerseits bereits in vielen Bereichen des Lebensunterstützens Anwendung finden und dort eine Entlastungsfunktion, eine Ordnungsfunktion vielleicht übernehmen, gleichzeitig aber noch wenig Verständnis darüber in der Bevölkerung vorhanden ist. Und nicht nur in der Bevölkerung, sondern Sie sehen auch, die Experten sind sich immer noch nicht so ganz einig, was KI eigentlich sein soll, wie ein KI-System zu einer Empfehlung kommt oder zu einer Entscheidung gelangt. Auch diese Fragen wird Session 2 thematisieren. Herzlichen Dank an dieser Stelle schon Peter Parizek für die Session-Moderation von Session 2. Ich freue mich nun, als Keynote von Session 2 Robert Geraci hier begrüßen zu dürfen. Robert Geraci ist Professor für Religionswissenschaften am Manhattan College, New York. Sie sehen, wir haben eine international besetzte Speaker-Liste hier. Sein Forschungsschwerpunkt liegt an der Schnittstelle von Technologie und Religion. Genau genommen forscht er über den Einsatz oder den Einfluss von Religion und Kultur auf die Ausgestaltung digitaler Technologien. Er ist Autor von Monographien wie Apocalyptic AI, A Visions of Heaven in Robotics, Artificial Intelligence in Virtual Reality, erschien Oxford 2010, Virtually Sacred, Myth and Meaning in World of Warcraft and Second Life und zuletzt Temples of Modernity, Nationalism, Hinduism and Transhumanism in South Indian Science. Seine Keynote hat den Titel Recoding Religion, Theological Renderings of Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Society. Robert Geraci, happy to welcome you here at our symposium.
I'm going to put this up so I can keep track of the time. Thank you all very much. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you to Fraunhofer FOKUs for bringing us together, for Carla and for inviting me to come and be here with you today, and especially to everyone here who made it back after the delicious lunch to join us. I apologize that I do not speak German. The upside of that is that if you think I'm crazy, you'll be able to talk about it at any length, and I won't know, because I'm Texan, and Texans don't get much beyond the borders of our own state. So what I'm going to do today is talk to you a little bit about where religion fits into thinking about artificial intelligence and its role in culture. So this is a quick overview. There are a lot more words than are generally going to be the case, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about my fieldwork so you know how to situate what I'm saying to you. And then we'll talk about technological determinism, the idea that somehow technologies determine what will come forth. From there, we'll move on to the global diffusion of science, technology, and ideas about those things, which will get us to the land where we'll be talking about technological versions of transcendence and religious commitments and how they structure AI, ultimately leading to how we see the future. So in terms of my fieldwork, Caroline was kind enough to introduce me, including the books that I've published. Those come from anthropological fieldwork. I was a visiting researcher at the Carnegie Mellon University Robotics Institute, where I interviewed scientists, engineers and scientists there. I did fieldwork online in the virtual world of Second Life and in the video game world of Warcraft. And then ultimately I ended up, thanks to a Fulbright Nehru Fellowship at the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, where I did interviews with scientists and engineers in academia, industry, and hacker culture. So the thoughts that I have are built around these many conversations that I've had with scientists and engineers over the many years since. The global development of modern science has created complex and interconnected networks through which both technologies and ideas circulate. Within these networks, artificial intelligence technologies are expanding their influence across human life, thus establishing structures that define human thought and practice. If AI should develop human equivalents or greater than human intelligence, then the influence of AI on society will be even more profound. Such technologies do not develop in a cultural vacuum, however, but are the result of pre-existing cultural and religious practices. As a result, religious traditions will have definite impact upon the global development of artificial intelligence, even as those technologies then define how people will live and work in the future. Science fiction and popular science approaches to artificial intelligence in the US and India demonstrate that human intervention in AI development is possible, and that there are no predetermined outcomes in how AI might further develop and subsequently structure society. Apocalyptic religious ideas underlie perspectives in the United States. These lend themselves to dreams of aspiration and hope, but also enable values of capitalist and military expansion. By contrast, recent Indian perspectives on AI leverage religious values of duty that could become tools for collaboration and care, or could become mechanisms of social control. Which religious and cultural perspectives we employ as we build increasingly powerful machines, and which stories we tell about such machines will dictate, in turn, how those machines constrain and control our own decision-making and our future lives. So, because I'm a scholar of religion, we have to start with the end, because we think about eschatology all the time, theories of the end. In the end, we are going to talk about the US and India and these two various values. One, apocalyptic transformations that are so commonly spoken of in the US, and the other, the idea of duty and social interconnectedness that is spoken of so much in India. But an important beginning. The future is not determined. We pay more attention to successful technological developments than unsuccessful ones, and that leads us to the presumption that the success of a technological artifact is an explanation of its own subsequent development. And that then technologies produce outcomes in the social world, and thus the next stages in technology all by themselves. That is, you have developed technology A, it inexorably leads to technology B, which inexorably leads to technology C, and so forth. This is technological determinism, and it is the idea that that technology guarantees its own outcomes. In technology, we tend to see linear and obvious developments after the fact, with all the controversies, the questions, and the concerns absorbed into the accepted technology. But human choices do in fact lead to technologies, and therefore the ends to which they aspire are implicated in human society. For example, the dumping of war supplies in 1918 led to cheap phenol or carbolic acid in the marketplace. That enabled the rise of the product Bakelite. It made Bakelite affordable, that carbolic acid was affordable. Without the war, you have a different technology that emerges. The belief in technological determinism is actually a kind of crypto-religion, that the characteristics of society, they play a major part in deciding which technologies are adapted and how they are adapted. Dynamics of the society matter: the level of government engagement, the rate of adoption across geography or industry or home, international politics such as war. All of these things affect how our technology will progress. The technology does not get to dictate that for us. The idea of technological determinism is primarily borrowed from Christian views of divine providence. David Noble wrote an excellent book called The Religion of Technology, in which he attempts to line up this idea of how Christians in medieval Europe and subsequently wanted to think about technological progress as part of God's plan. And in aligning technological progress with God's plan, they adopted a sense of providence within it. So claims that AI must inevitably become X or Y are therefore contingent upon a false logic that the technology is determining its own outcomes. But that doesn't mean that those technologies and their futures won't play out like a Greek tragedy, with the prediction producing the performance. We build social structures and ideas into technology. Those who prognosticate about machines are often involved in machine construction. They are positioned to direct design outcomes toward what they perceive to be inevitable. We build things into machines. I give you as an example 2 motorcycles in India, which probably don't look particularly noteworthy, but they both have a device on them that probably no motorcycle in Germany has. It's called a sari guard. In the motorcycle on the left-hand side, you can see that metal frame coming down to protect the sari from going into the wheel well. And also there's a foot pad for someone sitting side saddle on the motorcycle to rest, presumably, her feet on it. Now, it's a harmless example, but what it tells you is that the device itself, the sari guard, comes with a whole host of social expectations about how people will ride motorcycles, who will ride them, to what purpose they will be put. A motorcycle is a family vehicle in India, not in America. I have a friend in India who refers to his brother as the courageous one because his brother drives a car. So the machines have social ideas that are built within them. Right? And so the intentions and motivations that we think about in building artificial intelligence are relevant. Interests in social control and surveillance affect how we're designing AI, right? They're built into it. Are we, for example, looking at people as though they are potential terrorists? That says something about us who are doing the looking more than it says about the person who might be observed. Other parts of culture are also built into AI technology, and these are globally shared with the technology, because technology moves around, right? Once upon a time, we had this idea of diffusion. It's not correct. The picture on the left, that Europe, and if you're late enough in history, North America also, is where science and technology emerged, and then it diffused out to all these other places in the world. That's not actually correct. Scientific networks are very complicated, and knowledge is not really produced in any geographical location. Now, that's not to say that systems of power and prestige and patronage, funding and so forth, or even, it's not even to deny that most, perhaps, of the most influential scientists in the world are in Europe and the United States. That's not what I'm saying, but rather that there's a collaborative knowledge-making enterprise. If you have a set of botanical supplies from the southern Indian state of Kerala, and you have all kinds of local knowledge about what those plants, how they grow, how they mature, what they look like, what they could be used for, and then that botanical set of supplies, I can't remember what the right word is off the top of my head, ends up moving to Brussels or to Moscow or to somewhere else, then there's knowledge moving all around, and there's collaboration among different people, and so we can't come to the conclusion that there was one place where all the knowledge got generated. That didn't happen. The knowledge was generated through a network of communication. And so the same thing is true also about ideas, which is, of course, the main topic of my presentation here today. So even though power structures may tend to favor, at one point, just Europe, and then maybe the Euro-American West, it is still the case that knowledge as it is generated and the ideas that are generated around that knowledge are part of a much bigger picture. They're part of a global picture. And so we're all sort of in a position where we have to recognize that, otherwise we risk the erasure of real people. Real people get erased from the narrative, right? Often that's people from non-Western cultures who might not be credited in, say, an 18th century manuscript about botany, but it also includes women, for example, who wouldn't be credited in an 18th century manuscript about geology. And there were, in fact, a number of women who were important in paleontology and drawing in fossil collection and that kind of thing, and they don't end up in many of the books. So what I'm interested here then is to think about how the history of science, which shows that things, as we come to understand things, we build systems of knowledge, we build languages for them at the same time, right? We move from, say, a phlogiston theory of heat to a caloric theory of heat because the caloric theory of heat works better, right? It doesn't mean the caloric theory of heat would end up being the final theory of heat. It's just better than the other one. So we're building a language with which to talk about these things. And when we think about artificial intelligence, we have to ask ourselves what kinds of language we're building around artificial intelligence and which people are sort of authorized to speak about it. How easy is it for people to understand, to appreciate, and to talk about the power structures that are present in artificial intelligence design? And what does it mean to identify those power structures that are inherent at present and potentially present in the future? So the terms, the study, and even the experience of religion and artificial intelligence are perhaps coming into being based on today's social and scientific rules. What rules comprise the scientific and social studies of AI? How is AI to be designed? What motivations should dominate the design and deployment of artificial intelligence? Whose needs should be met? Whose voices should be heard and in what forums, public or private? Who should have access? All these kinds of questions force us to reflect on how the future might unfold for us. What are the modes of thought that must emerge when we call, in the US, for example, the humanities, history, literature, and so forth, when those refer to human beings and machines instead of just human beings? Things that were largely the province of human beings might become also the province of machines in the future. As an example, the next Rembrandt, right? This painting, which was produced by a machine, which using a learning algorithm had figured out how to paint things that looked like as though Rembrandt had painted them. Right? This is I wonder not so much about painting, but also about politics, about theology, and other domains. What are the horizons of control that we can approach in guiding one set of organized knowledge into a future set of organized knowledge? Can we think enough about today's intersection of science, technology, and culture to guide something of tomorrow's? AI reconfigures what we can say about ourselves, about life, about networks of labor. AI doubly compounds these complicated, difficult relationships that when we study human beings. It's hard enough to talk about the meaning of life or the dynamics of labor economies when you're only talking about human beings. When you throw machines of quasi or even real intelligence into the mix, it gets much harder. And in some domains, that's even trickier. As I said, I'm from Texas, and if there's one thing that everyone in the world knows about Texans, it's that we Texans, we all love what technological object? Someone want to jump in there for me? Guns. We love guns, right, in Texas. So just as an example, many of you probably saw earlier in the last week or two, Boston Dynamics released a video of its latest Atlas robot. Now they're doing amazing cool stuff, and they have this robot and it's jumping on platforms, and to think about where that has come in the last 15 to 20 years shows just astounding ingenuity in human labor. But for just a minute, pretend you're a Texan and imagine it with a gun. That video gets real different real quickly when you think of it that way. And so what I'm interested in then is how do we talk about the culture around the technology in a way that we leverage it for good outcomes, positive outcomes, rather than problematic outcomes. These ways of thinking about human beings are interlocking, and when we throw AI into the mix, it gets very complicated and irrevocably joins us to the physical sciences as well as we muddle along trying to figure out things like what constitutes the human. So, to intervene upon AI and its role in society, what happens when we think then about the global nature of those human sciences in a truly global way, including people from other places, the possibility of machines, and also, because it's just what I do, religious considerations? Visions of technological transcendence emerge. For those of you who are not familiar with the term transhumanism, it is the idea, either cultural or religious or philosophical, depending on who you ask. It is the idea that we will use technology to overcome the limits of human life. Now, to some meaningful extent, we are all transhumanists. If you are wearing clothing to keep warm or eyeglasses so that you can see, you are already using technology to overcome your human limits. But there's a fairly big difference between eyeglasses so that you can see and uploading your mind into a robot so that you'll live forever, right? Somewhere in there, there's like this big chasm of difference. And so transhumanism leans toward that whole uploading your mind or taking a pill that makes you young forever or using some sort of massive augmentation to improve yourself. And in our own understanding of culture, there are sort of critical figures in this. Many of them are in science fiction. I put just Isaac Asimov on here, but we could talk about Arthur Clarke and his ideas of humanity evolving into a further state. Robert Heinlein and his belief in long-lived human beings. So we could kind of multiply examples of science fiction authors, but Asimov's interest was in this society where human beings and machines could live with one another, right? And he talks about the distrust that might exist between those communities and what it might mean or what it might take to overcome them. But he also recognized, in the very last story of his collection of stories, I, Robot, he recognizes that transcendent AI, if we had machines that really could make a whole lot of decisions better than we can, that would leave humanity subservient, right? Even though the machines were doing it in humanity's own best interests, right? And he wrestles with the complication of, if the machine makes better decisions than you would, should you just do what it says? And maybe your life will be more peaceful and more fruitful. But it also makes you a tool of the machine, right? It's this complicated question. The next person I have up there is a scientist, an engineer. Hans Moravec was a roboticist, an absolutely seminal roboticist. His work in mobile robotics was really the origin point for 30 years worth of figuring out how to get a robot to move from one part of a room to another part of a room, right? A very influential person who wrote pop science books like Mind Children, The Future of Robot and Human Intelligence. And in Mind Children and in his other works, he argues that machines are gonna get really, really smart, much, much smarter than we are. The machines will be transcendent. And that we, in our envy of that, will upload our minds into robots and we will live forever, right? And this was a very serious plan for him. He once told me he was too busy making the plan happen to talk about it. That was disappointing to me. I wanted to talk about it. But there we have it, right? And that actually influenced the way he thought about technology in his own work. And after he had left Carnegie Mellon and was working in the private sector, for him, the idea of building a factory robot was actually implicated in the idea that one day robots were going to take over the entire universe. So that's pretty significant. And that idea was adopted by Ray Kurzweil, who's the most popular champion of it, now works for Google, but he invented a whole bunch of things. He's a famous guy, smart guy. So Ray Kurzweil's made that idea very popular, and now we see it in all kinds of popular culture. Movies like Transcendence with Johnny Depp, the movie Her, in TV shows like Black Mirror. It's kind of all over the place, this idea that technology is going to allow us to transcend our current situation. And so then I have this real goofy flowchart because I just wanted a way to kind of visualize some of these ideas that you have in kind of the way we've seen technology evolve in the Euro-American West as a Christian heritage that, combined with the technologies at present, had created this movement called transhumanism. People came to believe that this is what we could do with technology. And they might be right. I'm not saying they aren't. I'm not taking a position on whether or not we're going to upload our minds into robots and live forever. But then those transhumanist ideas subsequently both impacted the way some of those people were thinking about and building technologies, but then they combined with various Indian traditions, and it's only because all I know about are the US and India that those are my domains of inquiry, to an Indian version of transhumanism, which may or may not be affecting the way the outcomes in technology, but ultimately we're moving forward towards some kind of global sense of what technology does for people, and at the same time, new kinds of technologies. So those kind of religious elements, right? I mentioned Hans Moravec. That's a picture of Ray Kurzweil up there predicting the singularity. And his book, the reason I put his book Fantastic Voyage on, even though it's not his most interesting work or anything, but I love the subtitle, Live Long Enough to Live Forever. There's your agenda, right? Buy Mr. Kurzweil's vitamins, you'll live forever. And he actually does sell vitamins. But this idea this is an apocalyptic vision that Moravec paints, a true transformation of the world, a shift from biological life to machine life, a shift from nature into computers, into computing. Right? It's a whole new world, and one that human beings will only meaningfully occupy after we have ourselves been transformed to match that world. So there's this religious idea of transformation, and we might be living at a time when we really need a vision of transformation. I know personally in America right now, I'm hoping November 6th is a moment of transformation. But you know, we perhaps need this vision, this aspirational hope. I'm not sure. But at the same time, we do have to worry about the idea that if the machines know better, you're just supposed to do what you're told, right? And people already dumb themselves down when they're talking to machines. Just listen to someone else trying to talk to Siri and watch. The person will look less human by the minute as he or she tries to express to Siri what he or she wants. Right? We dumb ourselves down already, and that's with machines that aren't very smart. What if the machines get much smarter? How dumb might we make ourselves in comparison? And how dehumanized might we end up in decision making? Another vision, another cultural vision. Early visions of science fiction in India were really contingent upon Isaac Asimov, but they have transformed in really interesting ways. And the movie Anukul, which is on YouTube, it's 20 minutes long, it's well worth seeing, is a movie about a Sanskrit teacher who ends up with a robot. And the robot reads the Bhagavad Gita, and they talk about duty together. And I'm not going to spoil the end, except for that the Sanskrit teacher and the robot come together in a mutual sense of duty and what it means to be there for one another. So just as there's something really positive in the kind of aspirational hope of Hans Moravec's version of transhumanism, there's something really positive here in the idea that duty, we have duty to one another, we might protect those who are vulnerable, and that would be a really good thing. And we see this in Indian scientists who will quote Gandhi, they will quote Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru himself, the first prime minister of India, spent decades talking about the importance of science and technology to the improvement of the world, to the amelioration of the human condition, and to rescuing people from poverty, right? So a sense of duty can give you that, or it could give you the idea that everybody belongs in a certain place and isn't allowed to move out of that place, right? So there are kind of real outcomes there, and we have to consider what the technological motivations might be, whether they're transforming the world or building structures of duty. Can they undermine the most problematic parts of human involvement with technology, right? Can they emphasize our best visions of technology? Do we want to think about machines as a tool for uploading ourselves into them and departure from the human condition, or as a tool for a different kind of society, or as a tool for ameliorating misery? Exactly what is it that we are trying to do? What our relationships are with the machines are built into those machines. And so different cultural perspectives can come along with very different visions, uses, applications, and development of technology. There is no one outcome, not from where we stand right now. This is not to champion essentialist and orientalist perspectives on India versus the West. I am not suggesting that India is spiritual while the West is scientific, or that India is good while the West is bad. Those kinds of visions are basically clueless for a variety of reasons, not least of which, though, in the context of what I've had to say today, is that the apocalyptic perspectives in the US are clearly religious, right? And the Indian value of duty can be turned toward negative outcomes. So nobody's the winner here. It's not like the US or India has a better vision, but there are better and worse interpretations of both visions. And in all cultures, we have those kinds of choices, right? There's a kind of recursive process here where what we design the machines to do, inadvertently or intentionally, then comes back to structure our society. So a conscious awareness of what's happening culturally might provide leverage for better outcomes rather than worse. Given the significance and power of AI technologies, this seems vital for human flourishing. Thank you.